you're viewing the Parliament Channel 11, also broadcasting on 105.5 FM.
The Commonwealth is a voluntary association of 54 independent states, working together towards shared goals of democracy, development, and peace. Member countries span 6 continents and oceans, from Africa to Asia, the Americas, the Caribbean, Europe, and the South Pacific. The Commonwealth is seen as a special family, a family of nations.
Barbados is a sovereign island country in the Lesser Antilles. Outside of the main hurricane belt, it lies between the Caribbean Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean, northeast of Venezuela. A large area of Barbados is circled by coral reefs. The west coast of coral shore beaches mesmerizes visitors with an expanse of white sand and calm turquoise waters. While on the wild Atlantic east coast, the lively surf pounds the rocky shore. Mostly flat, Barbados has a rolling terrain of limestone hills, lush flora and fauna, and a vast array of caves and underground lakes. Some historians claim that the original name for Barbados by the indigenous people was Ichirugunaim, with a possible translation of red land with white teeth. The origin for the later name Barbados is unclear, but according to traditional folklore it means bearded ones, and may relate to the island's bearded fig trees with aerial roots. In the late 16th and 17th centuries, the Spanish and Portuguese briefly visited Barbados. However, it was the British who established lasting settlements there. Captained by John Powell, the first English ship arrived in Barbados in 1625. By 1627, the first settlement began in what is now Whole Town. From the arrival of the first English settlers in 1627 until independence in 1966, Barbados was under uninterrupted British governance. During the early years, the majority of the population was white and male, with few African slaves. The cultivation of tobacco, cotton, ginger, and indigo was handled mainly by European indentured labor until the introduction of the sugar industry in the 1640s. Sugarcane completely transformed the society and economy. Indeed, the sugarcane industry in Barbados grew to become one of the largest in the world. By 1660, Barbados generated more trade than all the other English colonies combined. This continued until 1713, when it was eventually surpassed by larger islands such as Jamaica. As the Barbados economy grew, the island developed a large measure of local autonomy.
I think the success of the economy meant the success of the planters, meant the success of the ruling oligarchy that gave them a capacity to have influence in Britain itself, political influence, and therefore, in a sense, to say this was our place. That is demonstrated in the political complex of Britain itself. For instance, the Cromwellian episode, where Cromwell took over, from the Charles I and so on. The Barbadian planters actually resisted the Cromwellian regime, and Cromwell had to send naval forces out to Barbados, and there was a shootout off Oistins. And Barbados made a declaration in which the language in that declaration, some people say, informed the language of the Declaration of Independence of the American colonies.
Barbados has one of the oldest constitutions in the Commonwealth. The office of governor and a council were introduced in 1627, and a House of Assembly was constituted in 1639.
What was unbroken in Barbados was a parliament and an assembly. But these early assemblies, coming out of the 17th century and so on, would have been with a very limited number of people voting for them, and that continued right into the 19th century. Very few people up to the beginning of the 20th century. Very few people were voting because there would have been property franchise and both in relation to who could go into parliament and who could vote. So a very small number of people then were actually involved in voting and having representation. So if representative government in that sense was very limited, we started to break through with some expansion of the franchise immediately after emancipation. And that allowed for the first non-white Barbadian to enter parliament, which was Samuel Jackman Prescott in 1841.
For decades, politics in Barbados was dominated by the plantation owners and merchants of British descent.
Now, Barbados had the old representative system, and it normally had strong influence over the Windward Islands and Tobago. And it was felt that the administration would be more efficient, if Barbados could be the headquarters with the governor of Barbados and the Windward Islands, and you have a crown colony government system. And they sent out the Irishman John Pope Hennessy as the governor to implement this policy. And he was a very skilled troubleshooter. He came out and he was actually a very popular governor at first, in his first moments in presence in Barbados. And then he started his campaign for crown colony government. And the interest and consciousness was so keen that they picked it up immediately that he was where he was going. And they started to resist him, even to the extent of public meetings, holding public meetings and so on, to say that the governor was trying to take away their rights as Englishmen, and their right to rule the colony, and that they understood the colony better than the Englishmen anyhow.
A rebellion ensued between the planters and the masses.
So in fact, this was a rebellion that was going on with the governor's name as a slogan to mobilize people on behalf of the governor, on behalf of Crown Colony government. And it was resisted then by the planters, and the revolt became quite widespread and severe. And the governor eventually panicked, because he thought that the rebels would move to Bridgetown and sack Bridgetown. Very traditionally in Barbados, when rebellions like that took place, they will run to St. Anne's Port, which is opposite the road, the garrison. They will go there, or also in Carlisle Bay, go in ships off Carlisle Bay, and hope that the militia and the army could take care of the rebellion. And that is more or less what was happening. And the military eventually had to be committed. The planter militia was very active, and that is how the rebellion was put down. And on the basis of that, the planters in that sense had won, because they saved the governor. So now Pope Hennessy in that sense had failed, and a compromise had to be worked out. So the compromise became the 1881 Act.
The executive committee functioned in a similar way to ministerial government. Then, by the mid-1930s, party politics began to develop from within the trade union movement.
In the post-1937 period, the role of the representatives of labor, which formed the content of the mass democratic parties that developed in the 1940s, they were carried on to the executive committee in 1946 in what is called the Bush experiment. And in a sense, it was the beginning of ministerial government in Barbados. But we did not push for the full adult suffrage until the 50s. So then it is the party of Grantley Adams, the Barbados Labour Party, that dominates in the 40s and into the 50s. And in the mid-50s, towards the mid-50s, there's a breach in the Barbados Labour Party, and out of that comes persons who form the Democratic Labour Party. The Federation then intervenes in 1958, and Grantley Adams is recruited more or less then to go to lead the Federal Labour Party in Trinidad in the federal parliament as Prime Minister of the West Indies. It means that he as leader of the Barbados Labour Party is removed. And he did not choose a very effective lieutenant to take over from him.
After the collapse of the Federation, the Barbados government under Errol Barrow resolved to seek independence.
With the collapse of the Federation, that is a significant blow to Grantley Adams. It is almost like the destruction of his political career. But he returns to Barbados anyhow, and he gets back into Parliament in the 66 election.
At independence in 1966, Barbados formally adopted the Westminster parliamentary system of government. It functions as a constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary democracy. Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state, represented by the Governor-General, and the Prime Minister is the head of the government. The Constitution provides for a House of Assembly of 13 members and a Senate of 14 members.
We feel that the time has come when we need to repatriate our Constitution. We feel that the time has come when we need to grapple with the issue of who should be our head of state. And we are quite satisfied that the time has come when we have offered Barbados.
Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament. This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
Good morning, a pleasant good morning to the viewing public of the Parliament Channel. A very good morning to members of the police service, and a welcome and good morning to members of the Ministry of Education. This is the committee's first public hearing for the 11th Parliament, and the subject of inquiry of this committee, which is the Committee on Public Administration and Social Services, is to deal with a highly topical and current issue of violence amongst our school-age population. This is a subject that is of tremendous concern to us as a society, and it is for this reason that members of the committee, this joint select committee made up of opposition, government, independent members from both houses of parliament, agreed that we need to find out from the various stakeholders in the society what really is the cause of this problem. Why is it persisting? And how can we craft solutions? Because we hold the view in the Joint Select Committee that of all the problems facing Trinidad and Tobago, this is the one that is perhaps the most unacceptable because it represents the next generation. And we are here to legislate, not only for the current generation, but to make decisions which will improve the quality of life of our citizens in the future. Before I open the introductions, I would like to simply reiterate for the participants in today's inquiry and for the listening public the objectives of the current inquiry for today. First objective, to determine the extent to which violence is pervasive among students in primary and secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago. Second, to understand the line ministry's plans, and the line ministry is the Ministry of Education, to understand the line ministry's plans and strategies for addressing school violence, and in particular, the wide subject of bullying in schools, bullying in all its forms. And the third, to determine the effectiveness of multi-sectoral efforts and rehabilitation services targeted towards students who have displayed a tendency to be violent or engage in acts of violence, and also to determine what is the effect on students who have been the subject of violent attacks on their person or on their psyche. We invited submissions from a number of stakeholders, and we acknowledge the submission that was made to the committee from the Ministry of Education, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Anti-Bullying Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Naparima Girls High School, Young RBC Young Leaders Group 2015. This is, I think, the first of our inquiries into the subject, because there are a number of issues we need to deal and a number of stakeholders we would need to consult with. Today we have present with us, yes, the representatives of the Ministry of Education and representatives of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We will be posing questions to them and engaging them in a discussion on these issues with an aim of crafting solutions. The ultimate objective of this inquiry is to prepare a report which will be submitted to Parliament for consideration, and of course for the line ministries and the various stakeholders in arms of the state to take action so that we could eliminate this problem, which, according to what we see in the media, seems to be pervasive. I will ask members of the committee to introduce themselves before I ask members of the Ministry of Education and the Police Service to also introduce themselves. May I start with my left? Please use a microphone, yes.
My apologies. Good morning to all. My name is Christine Uwalo Hussain, Member of Parliament for Komoto Manzanilla.
Good morning all. My name is Nadine Stewart, Government Senator.
Good morning everyone. My name is Hafiz Ali, Government Senator.
And I am Dineshwar Mahabir, Independent Senator, Chairman of the committee. May I invite members of the Ministry of Education to introduce themselves?
Good morning. My name is Gillian McIntyre, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. And to my right is Mr. Harilal Sicharan, Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education. Next to him is Ms. Natasha Barrow, Deputy Permanent Secretary with responsibility for human resources in the Ministry of Education. Mr. Claudel McCullough, who is our Deputy Permanent Secretary responsible for infrastructure in the Ministry of Education. And behind, if I start at the extreme right, Ms. Karen Cooper, who is our systems analyst too, so the IT area. Mr. Ashram Dioraj, who's our Director, School Supervision. And Ms. Dr. Patty Bharat Singh, our Manager for Student Support Services. Both very important persons in this area.
Thank you very much, and we are pleased to see such a turnout from the Ministry of Education. And may I invite members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. I am Inez Joseph, Assistant Commissioner of Police Acting, Community Relations.
Thank you.
Morning all. My name is Curtis Paul, Superintendent of Police in charge of the Community Policing Secretariat.
Good morning. I am Ellen Lewis, the Head of Communications for Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Thank you very much, representatives of the police service. We have more. I am so sorry.
Good morning everyone. I am Michael Pierre, Acting Assistant Superintendent, Public Information Officer for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Okay.
Good morning all. My name is Dale Joseph, Acting Sergeant of Police attached to the Cybercrime Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
All right. Okay, and that's the contingent from the Trinidad and Tobago Police, right? Thank you very much. Before I begin the formal questioning to the panel, to the representatives, may I ask the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Education to address the committee with her brief opening remarks, and then I will move to the representative of the police service, who will do similar. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we are extremely happy to be here to contribute to this Joint Select Committee on the issue of violence in schools, in particular bullying. It is of concern to the Ministry of Education that there is an apparent increase if you look at what has been happening within the last week or so. I just want to say up front, we are here to answer any questions that you ask, and if we can't provide those answers, we would be happy to provide them afterwards if we can't provide them on the spot. And we also are hopeful that we would have some recommendations that would help us for moving forward. Just to summarize where we sit, where we see what are some of the factors, because our opinion is that it is a very complex issue which has to be looked at in several levels, and we do welcome this opportunity for partnership with the police service in particular. The first factor to me is that we are part of a culture of violence, both in terms of history and in terms of the way we live right now. If you go back, although we have removed a corporal punishment it's not allowed in schools, I think if you check the population, every 2 and 3 persons would have experienced corporal punishment. They would not have had an opportunity in school where they were felt affirmed. Many of them may have experienced actual beating, and so you have parents, in fact, who cannot help their children because the system continues. Even though you don't have physical beating, you have attacks in terms of verbally how certain students are dealt with. This in turn comes about, yes, because of things like low levels of literacy and numeracy, which again may be impacted by the socioeconomic status of the persons attending in certain schools. Low levels of literacy and numeracy often shows itself as early as Standard 1 and follows on into the Form 1 in the secondary schools. Again, coming back to violence, it's on the television, it's on the internet. We're seeing it in other jurisdictions, and so you will find that copycat type patterns are developing, which I would think is contributing to the apparent rise. Parent and caregiver involvement I've hinted to already. Parents have experienced it and so are not even able to help their own children in the school system. Weak supervision and the quality of teaching is another issue. The school's administrative mechanisms and structures, vacancies, high levels of vacancy would contribute to weak oversight. And again, the community that you're in, because the school is only a microcosm of the wider society. So if you're in a community where there are gangs, or even in the more prestige schools where there is cyberbullying or things like that, it impacts on the school system. What are some of the solutions that we see and we have been working with? Risk profiles in terms of incidents in schools, deans and VPs, principals and senior teachers working together to improve supervision. We have introduced coaches for numeracy and literacy in schools, but we're also reviewing that. We've been conducting parental and education workshops, collaborating with the Teaching Service Commission to fill vacancies, and that was as recent as this week. We are setting up a series of meetings to try and identify where the vacancies are, what are the priorities for filling. One thing we have not looked at, but I would like to put on the table that may be something we could consider, is special selection of staff for schools with challenging environments and populations. working with other agencies such as the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Social Development in a collaborative mode. Two examples of that are the RAP program and which I'm sure the police they would talk about as well, and the peer mediation as well as the police youth clubs. Extracurricular activities being encouraged in schools, good guides, scouts, the RBC young leaders, the debating competitions, etc. And although there are some protocols for critical incidents, I believe we have to strengthen the protocols that are in place for perceived security threats that may come from the school, the surrounding community.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. McIntyre. A lot of the recommendations you are making will come up in the discussion, so I want to give you the opportunity and the Ministry of Education to elaborate on some of those interventions that you are advancing for us. But I'd like to give the representative of the community policing unit to address the committee briefly on their own perspective on this problem. Thank you.
My colleagues and I of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service wish to express our gratitude for the privilege of participating in this inquiry. It is our hope that our contributions would be of great value, and we look forward to the outcome of such an important inquiry, which we feel certain will only augur well for our youths and our country. Thank you very much.
Assistant Commissioner of Police. I will now open the inquiry for questioning, and so I could start with my left, MP Christine Iwalo Hussein, to start with her own question to the committee.
You spoke of the quality of teaching being an inhibitor for the progress of what is happening in school. Can you expand on what do you mean quality of teaching? There's a lack of quality teaching?
I think all of us, having gone through the school system, would have experienced that there are some teachers that reach children and are of relevance, and there's some that just don't. So one of the things that we have to do is to improve our selection mechanisms, and as I indicated, one of the things we are doing is meeting with the Service Commission in that regard.
Chair, if I may, you spoke about parental seminars. Are you looking at these seminars being mandatory? Because you have even PTAs, parents do not show up for PTAs, or you may have an incident in school concerning a child and the parents do not show. In the understanding how important parenting is at home for the attitudes to be addressed, how strict will you adhere to this seminar and parents attending?
Could I refer that question to Dr. Bharat Singh, because those are in progress right now.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members. In terms of the parenting and education program, this is an ongoing exercise that we are planning to expand on. It is a voluntary exercise, meaning that we can coerce parents to come into these, but we certainly do encourage parents to attend these. We have had over the last year approximately 26,000 plus parents attending 300 and approximately 27 workshops, again in the area of parenting and education. Topics would involve absenteeism, treating with special needs children, discipline issues, alternative strategies to corporal punishment, for instance, a number of areas. And these areas would be targeted to the particular needs of those schools. We, again, plan to increase those numbers as much as we can.
Thank you. May I follow up as the chair with your leave, MP, the issue that is raised is parental involvement, and I really would like to get from the permanent secretary the policy of the Ministry of Education with respect to having a PTA in every school in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you have such a policy, since PTA, of course, is governed by an act of parliament?
The CEO wanted to add to what Dr. Bharat Singh said, and I'm sure he'll also answer the question.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the issue of parental involvement, as you're aware, and as Dr. Bharat Singh said, there isn't anything compulsory for parents to attend conferences in school or even parent-teacher interaction. And in the submissions we made, one of the suggestions we looked at is, one, to make it mandatory for parents when they're required to attend school in relation to issues that arise with their children, and for the possibility of employers providing that time off, because in many instances we have parents who would say, well, I can't get time off from my job, and this is more so in the schools where we have issues. The other thing in relation to that has to do with out of school students who may be suspended, and some of the initiatives that the ministry is trying to implement in terms of having both parent and student involved in those conferencing and the follow-up action from the student support services, where currently, again, there is no compulsory requirement for parents to attend along with their students. So those are two suggestions in terms of the administrative framework that we've put forward in terms of consideration going forward. The question that you asked is in relation to PTAs in schools. The ministry's policy is that every school is required to have a parent-teacher association. The current dynamic within the education system is that you have PTAs in schools who function at the level of that school, and there are others who may be affiliated to the National Parent-Teachers Association, and there's no specific requirement that all PTAs join the National Parent-Teacher Association. But from a policy perspective, all schools are required to have PTAs.
Very much. A follow-up question from Senator Hafiz Ali.
I just want to know, with those 22,000 parents that attended the workshops you all had, how have that impacted upon the students with some violent behavior and the bullying aspects of, and would those parents with those children who usually display those types of behavior usually come to the workshop?
Dr. Bharat Singh.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of the feedback that we have gotten from the parents, let me just quickly step back. The parents that attend and caregivers that attend these workshops are actually targeted, meaning that the high-risk children, those that have been referred to student support at the first instance, are the ones that we're trying to get the parents and caregivers to attend these meetings, because these are our most challenging groups. We have been somewhat successful in getting them to attend. The feedback that we have gotten from them, and we know some of this because they are repeat attenders, if you will. They provide suggestions as to other topics that they'd be interested in. Some of the feedback, and I can probably provide this to the committee after, included learning new strategies, for instance, not being aware of certain information, because remember, it's geared towards providing information, tools, and techniques to help parents help their children. It's an empowerment type program. So the feedback from the parents in general tends to be quite positive. Now, in terms of what we're seeing impacting the children, how that would operate is if the parents get it, understanding a bit more about how to treat with the children, that they in turn, in terms of empowering and supporting their children, would be able to translate some of that. So supervision is one area in terms of care for their children after school, being aware as to where your children would be, etc. And since this program over the last year, one of the things that we will need to do literally is look at some of the numbers, particularly the numbers of repeat offenders.
Again?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to direct this question to community policing. In light of the fact that the program that is carried by the Ministry of Education, it's not mandated for the parents to attend. I see that in 1974, when the police youth clubs were in fact established, that your target group were the difficult as well as the delinquent youth, and that you provided ongoing interactions through counseling. Have you included parents and the immediate family in those counseling sessions?
Good morning again. Thanks very much. Youth development is fundamental to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to have youths get towards a positive life away from crime. We have several initiatives. Namely, one, we have our police youth clubs. The police youth clubs was formed 42 years ago, 1974, with 2 police youth clubs, Cokereed and Junction. Going forward, January, February 2016, we have 112 police youth clubs with 10,500 children throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago and the rest in Trinidad. Throughout our 9 police divisions, we have police youth clubs. We are governed by a constitution and is chaired by the chairman of the Commission of Police. We have our tenants, our spiritual development, sporting and cultural activities, social and community and education.
Could you confine yourself to the question posed by the MP who said?
I'm asking if your counseling sessions include the parents as well as the immediate family members of the child who may be delinquent or difficult, as guided by your establishment.
Yes, ma'am. Part of the framework structure of the police youth clubs is a parent body. And in that arm there, they are what we call the catalysts for the police youth clubs. It is structured around child, parent, or guardian, as the case may be. And it's fundamental to the child development. So the parent must be present in the functioning and operation of the police youth club.
Thank you very much. Before I move to Brigadier General Ansel Antoine, who will introduce himself, he came in a little bit late, I want to really pose a question to the community police. We have seen some disturbing videos of girl-on-girl violence, young girls fighting other young girls. I have seen it, you have seen it. When you observe such an instance occurring and you're able to identify the participants in that unacceptable activity, what does the community police do? What does the police do with respect to these girls? Do you all take them in a counseling session? Do you identify them, tell them that this behavior is unacceptable? Do you intervene in any way?
Counseling, among other things, is one of the initiatives of having teenage people, and as girls, as you indicated, be harnessed where the police youth club is being accepted.
Okay, but the question is this: do you intervene once you are able to identify the participants? Do you say, we have seen the video, we have seen 12 girls engage in unacceptable behavior, do we at that point in time intervene with all the participants and have a session immediately with them, together with the schools, together with their parents, together with their teachers, to indicate we cannot behave this way? Do you intervene in that way?
Yes, sir.
You do. Could I ask Senator Nadine Stewart to come in at this point?
Good morning again. Just a follow-up question from Mr. Chair. What is the prevalence of male-on-male violence, female-on-female, and male-on-female? And what measures are in place to deal with each separately?
That question is directed to anyone with the data and information, the incidence of the various types of violence. Do you have data on that? No. Community police, from just casual observation, would you say that you have much more male on male as opposed to female on female? What type of violence seems to be most prevalent? Perhaps you don't have the data, but casual observation from your experience.
The CEO is willing to take a shot at it.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a sense of, what type of violence. And I'm talking in a broader context here. Disrespect to authority in terms of students who are suspended is at the top of the list. Fighting without weapons, bullying, these are some of the areas that are at the top of our list in terms of suspension. I just wanted to go back, the Senator asked in relation to the prevalence of male, female, male on male. What our data shows, I didn't have it disaggregated for all what she said, but what our data shows that male on male is much more prevalent than female-female or male-female interactions. I can work out the specific ratios, but in terms of the prevalence, male on male is I
intervene here. We would like to get, if possible, the ministry has the information, the data. If you could send that in writing to us at a subsequent time, it will certainly guide us in the kinds of recommendations we will be making. Before I go back to to MP Nawal Hussain, I would like to bring in retired General Ansel Antoine, MP. Committee, Brigadier, and pose your question.
Good morning. I am retired General Ansel Antoine. I am the MP for Dabodi Omira and the Minister of Public Utilities.
Yes, very well.
I want a follow-up question to my colleague, Mrs. Hussain. I know that you say a policy in the police youth clubs about counseling of young offenders, if you want to put it that way, and their family and parents' immediate family. But history has shown that there's difficulty in getting parents to attend PTA meetings, to attend sporting events. When there's counseling of young men, young women who have gone afoul of the law, of the school regulations, is there a response from the parents and family members to joint counseling of these young people? Thank you.
Yes, sir. One of our initiatives is what we call crime intervention for troubled youths. This initiative came out of the Sandy Grande Police Youth Club, also the St. James Police Youth Club under Mr. Shabadi. In Sandy Grande Police Youth Club, in 2012, what we have is children that suspended from school a letter is sent to the police club, and the parents or guardian visit the police clubs in Sandy Grande and St. James. A form is filled out, and we have volunteer professionals, social workers, and others, together with the police officer, who is trained in certain skills to inform that the transformation of that child, also the involvement of the parents. And when that is finished, a letter is then sent back to the principal of that specific school with the end result, as the case may be.
Any follow-up, Brigadier? Yes.
And this question is now to the Ministry of Education. What is the response of the school authorities in terms of the counseling of young offenders through the police youth clubs?
Either CEO or Dr. Barasan, who would? CEO, would you?
My response would be in the broader context, because we haven't collected data separate from counseling provided by the police or by our student support services. Our feedback from our guidance and officers and social workers have indicated that the response to counseling has been positive. One of the challenges we have there is that we need to identify some specific metrics. We've qualitative feedback, but we haven't identified specific metrics to quantify that measure of success. But what I also want to say, and this is also from our officers and their own intervention with students who need services, is that very often the gains made through the counseling process, when many of these students go back into the communities, is often offset because students are often forced, or not forced when they go back within the communities, to display characteristics which are accepted within the community. So we are often challenged in terms of maintaining the gains that we've made through the counseling process because of the external environment to which students are exposed.
Mr. Ali, do you want to come in? Yes, I hear you'll come in.
This is for the police service. What is the police service doing to identify those individuals or the high-risk students, and exactly what the Chief Education Officer just said, and cutting that umbilical cord that creates the problem in the whole when they go back into the community and they have these individuals who is influencing them. How will the police step in that part there and separate the two to keep the child on the correct path? Does the police have a method of dealing with that?
ASP Pierre will take this one.
Good morning. Regarding the information of the high-risk students, we do not collate that information. We receive the information from the Ministry of Education. And it is then based on the request by the Ministry of Education, we would intervene. And we usually utilize the anti-bullying program that we go from school to school. In that program, we would identify to the students and the teachers as well all the relevant information that would identify what would be a crime as opposed to what might be a prank or what children might feel is just normal everyday behavior. What we would do, we would also include the social workers in the school in our anti-bullying program. So when that situation arises where we identify particular students, the social workers would then take it further from there. And as long as the police are needed to assist, we will do so.
Okay. Could I follow up on that? And that is, with respect to the practicalities of a situation.
Yes.
Take, for example, a student. He wishes to use a washroom. And as he enters the washroom, he has encountered someone who says, you have to pay me a $5 tax to enter.
Yes.
And the student is terrified, and he needs to get some measure of comfort that this situation will not happen. When the student makes a report, I'd imagine to his teacher, how does that student get redress in a timely manner from that unacceptable behavior?
Now, with regards to the anti-bullying program, we identify all crime types. Now, we have serious reports of crimes, we have minor crimes, and we have minor offenses. We identify crimes such as extortion, robbery, larceny from the person, larceny, malicious wounding, malicious damage. There are many different crime types, right? And what we have realized in doing this program is that a lot of these students would not realize that taxing, in some instances, depending on how it is done, it could be an extortion. It can also be a robbery, which carries a very serious penalty and in some instances incarceration. Therefore, when we educate the students with regards to the information, we see that it initiates a change in their behavior.
And a follow-up, is it that students in schools are aware as soon as they enter schools that these are the types of crimes that the community police have been able to identify? These are the crimes that are punishable, and these are the crimes that can lead to suspension of students. Do you have that kind of program to alert students from Form 1 that these are the behaviors that will be considered to be criminal offenses?
I would say yes to that question, Mr. Chair, in that the anti-bullying program targets students from Form 1 up to Form 6. Therefore, the education factor regarding the type of crimes is given to all students when we enter into these schools.
I get a response from the Ministry of Education on that as well, because this seems to be drilling down to the really heart of the problem. How do we resolve these pervasive problems? And it has to include the Ministry of Education's policy as well with respect to such deviant actions.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the different incidents which are considered outside of what is acceptable within schools, all schools are required to either utilize, we have a school code of conduct which identify the whole gamut of offenses that are unacceptable and also the consequences of that. Consequences range from counseling with student, parent, all the way to person being charged where it is referred to the police. So all schools either utilize the school code of conduct, which provides specific guidelines, or they utilize the school code of conduct and they develop a discipline matrix, which is now specific to the schools. And this is a requirement for all schools. So that information is conveyed to students in several ways. Some schools would have converted that into specific rules and guidelines for students which are shared with them. Some schools share that information through assemblies, homeroom periods. We have something called a circle time where during homeroom periods, discussion takes place in terms of incidents and the consequences. And our feedback, for example, in terms of bullying, maybe more than 80% of our students are very knowledgeable and aware of what it is, and about 20% have a fair knowledge. So it's something that is part of the requirement for schools to share. And having said that, Chair, you would appreciate that when you're dealing with the large number of schools, there sometimes are gaps, so because incidents don't happen in a particular school, sometimes we tend to slip in terms of sharing that information, and it's something that we'll need to address. I also want to touch on the issue raised with respect to, for example, a student being bullied or taxed or going to the toilet and all of that. There are standard procedures that we are We have shared with schools, but we recognize that we need to reinforce. So for example, we have utilized one strategy, which is safety by environmental design. Now, while we cannot change the physical structure of a school, we are rolling out and we are sharing with schools, and have already done so with many schools, where, for example, areas where incidents are likely to happen in schools are identified. We are using a multi-team approach within schools involving our safety officers, or security officers, MTS, or in the case of denominational schools, officers hired by the denominational board, the complement of deans. Also part of that team would involve the guidance officers, social workers, in terms of coming up with simple things, starting from the gate where protocols for person entering and leaving, and also in terms of deployment of resources at specific times. We are utilizing data collected at the school level to make those decisions. So for example, what are the incidents based on the data you have are likely to occur and how prevalent they are? Where are they likely to occur during the day and when, so that the deployment of resources in terms of supervision within the compound will be effective. Some of these things in some schools it's already been implemented, in others we are rolling out.
CEO, many times these things break down. We have had the instance with the Chaguanas North Secondary School, I think, in which you had a situation of almost crisis. So that what we are trying to get at is, despite all the interventions you are making, why it is that there are sometimes lapses, serious lapses in the security. But I want you to hold while I pose a question to the community policing department. How often do you actually visit schools and display a physical presence, simply to walk around the school? Do you do that often? In all schools, do you simply display that there is a presence? Because it is known, simply seeing a police officer is enough to discipline the majority of the population. So do you actually make it your business, together with the school principals, to visit schools, walk around, and show that you have a presence on the compound?
Yes, sir. In the 9 police divisions, there are community policing officers, and on a daily basis, visits and patrols, together with lectures, are being done to the schools in the station districts. And if I will say that it's throughout Trinidad and Tobago. It's an ongoing process, and it's part of the community policing mandate.
And would you say that in schools, because you have limited resources in community policing, would you say that in schools where there is a more visible community policing presence, the instances of deviant behavior tend to be lower?
Yes, sir.
So therefore, one recommendation we would like to make immediately is that the community policing department make a greater presence in schools, physical presence, simply a visit, a good morning, a hello, how are you, we are here. Do you think that is something that will augur well for the reduction of violence among students?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I will come back to Senator Hussain, who has been quiet for a little bit, to MP Hussain, rather.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back to CEO. Earlier in your comments, you had indicated that the counseling program was in fact successful. And then you said that you did not have any qualitative or quantitative data to provide that, that success rate, because of the fact that when the student went back into the environment, he in fact, or she in fact, would have to conform to whatever takes place in the community, which in fact is not a success rate, in my opinion. Therefore, so I'm going to ask, is there a high rate of repeat offenders in school? That is, the same students are being suspended for violent encounters on a recurring basis?
Let me just make a slight correction. I said based on the qualitative data, that is the feedback from the guidance officers and individual students, that we have gotten positive feedback. I also said in terms of some of those students who have displayed positive outcomes based on the counseling, they often regress because they when they go back into the community, they end up being required to conform to certain behaviors. So I wasn't referring to the entire group, but the challenge in terms of ensuring that the counseling and the service provided by student support services maintain the positive outcomes that we expect and we have seen. I do not have with me incidents of repeat offenders. That I will have to get for you in terms of looking at the data, because our current data collection, what we do is we collect incidents and they're collected as suspension in separate categories. And that is one of the areas we have identified in terms of improving the metrics in terms of making decisions.
Is there a time frame for that information to be collected and collated?
Well, it's not just collection. I think PS might have mentioned we have revised and we're continuing to revise our strategy to deal with violence and indiscipline. But you may be aware that as part of our overview of the education system, we are also looking at violence and indiscipline as one of the issues that we want to treat with. And therefore, our review will also factor in the feedback from the different stakeholders in terms of making the determinations. While that is happening, we continue to work on trying to improve what we have currently.
What is the maximum period of suspension of principal?
Could I just add that we've recently completed a national consultation on education, and this was a specific issue. So there's both the data coming out of the consultation and the survey that we would have undertaken prior to the consultation. So again, that's another source of data on this matter.
Thank you very much. MP Hussain, could I ask Nadine Stewart, Senator Stewart, to come in at this time?
My question is to the community policing. Based on something you said prior, where counseling sessions are done for students through the police youth clubs and a report is sent to the schools. So my question is, after this report is sent, do you all have any follow-up sessions with these students, whether through the school or through your own initiative?
Yes, ma'am. We have ongoing follow-up with the school through the involvement of the principal. When his child is re-accepted back to the school, there's continuous follow-up with a view of obtaining the status of the child, as the case may be. So there are always collaboration between the youth club, community policing, and the school by the principal.
One more question. So have you all noticed any re-offenders coming out of your program through the follow-up sessions?
At a very minimum rate, ma'am.
P. Antoine?
In the youth subculture, they have different perspectives than we adults do. When a young man or young woman is suspended from school and they return, they tend to be elevated in rank in the eyes of the other student because he's a bad boy, as the case may be. He has been suspended, as the case may be. What mechanisms do you have in place, and this is both for the police, youth clubs, and the Ministry of Education, to deal with students who have gone afoul of the law, been suspended, and returned to school? Does the other students see that, for instance, their parents have to come in school at a certain time, the offenders are isolated in a sense that they have to go to different counseling sessions and so. What mechanism does Ministry of Education and the police usually have in place to deal with the perspectives and the perceptions of the youth subculture in the school? Or does the student just simply return to the school environment and just melts into the school environment, and there are no consequences in terms of the suspension and the whole perception of the young people in terms of somebody who has a rank because he has been through suspension?
You like Ministry of
Yes,
Education?
Ministry of Education, most appropriate, yes, thank you.
The suspension or the removal of students from school process is well defined. So for example, a student creating an offense in school can be suspended by the principal for a maximum, up to a maximum of 7 days. If the incident warrants and it's serious enough, the principal can request for extended suspension, and the minister normally would grant that extended suspension. In terms of what happens to the student outside, if it's within the 7 days, student support services engage students and parents as required in terms of providing counseling and the necessary support in terms of trying to introduce whatever corrective action. In the case of extended suspension, there is also a defined process in terms of a conference between the parent, teachers, students, chaired by the school supervisor, in terms of determining the process and the best outcomes for that particular child. So there are a number of things. And students returning to school, there is also ongoing support for students. In terms of informing or making sure that other students within the school are aware of that, I'm not sure, and I will ask Dr. Bharat Singh to expand on that, but I'm not sure that that is the most appropriate way to treat with it. But I'll ask my colleague from Student Support Services to add.
But really, the question posed by MP Antoine was really this: the value system amongst the young person, the young offender, may be different from the value system of the adult population, in that once someone has returned from a period of discipline or suspension, he returns elevated as opposed to be demeaned. And I want to pose, before we go off to your staff in the Ministry of Education, to pose to the community policing department the possibility of using real role models to inspire these deviants. For example, we have role models in cricket, role models in football, role models in entertainment. These are the young people who are going to create, to my mind, a greater impact amongst fellow young people than other people in the society. Have you used these young national icons to indicate to these youthful deviants that the stars they look up to are really the pseudo-stars, and the real inspiring figures they should look up to are the young people, their own age group, who are very successful at the national level, regional level, community level? Have you done that to address the issue raised by the perverse issue of who really is a role model to follow, raised by MP Antoine?
Yes. I would like to respond to that. I would like to take the opportunity to refer to the city program. That's the care and intervention for troubled youths. Since that program has been introduced, we have had many professionals given voluntary service to the initiative. In that way, the students or young people, they are exposed to professionals who would be guiding them along the way and being direct role models to them. It also lends the air to the use of the police youth club, because with the city program, The program, it's not just where they go through a period for 2 weeks of suspension or howsoever much time and go back into school. They are trained or given a series of training so that when they go back into the education system, that they are more, they have a greater understanding than when they were suspended before.
I intervene here.
Yes.
As a suggestion now.
Yes.
Do you see merit in creating a roster of young individuals in the society, in the sciences, in the professions, in the arts, in entertainment, in sport, who are really individuals young people should follow, and using that roster, encouraging these young people to participate with community policing so that they can interact with the chronic habitual offenders in the youthful population?
Definitely, Mr. Chair. I think it's an opportunity for all the professionals, young professionals, middle-aged professionals, even to intervene, to give that, lend that support to an initiative like this.
Thank you very much. So another recommendation definitely coming out is that we use our young icons to inspire the youthful deviants. Brigadier Antoine, you have a follow-up?
I would like the response from the Ministry of Education to the previous question.
I think that in my opening, I hinted to the fact that if you equate performance and how a child would have gone through a school system, you probably have 1 in 3 children that have done well. Your 2 in 3 that did not do well and so would not necessarily have been treated as favored students in your school system experienced beatings, experienced harsh words, and continue to experience. So that's not an objective measure. I'm simply using what are our normal performance rates. And I'm just saying that if you bear in mind that you really have 2 in 3 persons who I would call abused persons from a system, because it's certainly not the kind of system that encourages learning, that encourages application of learning. Instead, it rewards passing tests, getting good grades. Even your icons have experienced this. So it is, I'm simply trying to say that we have a problem, and we have been attacking the problem with traditional measures. And there is an absolute culture that has to be changed if we are to get at the true root of the problem.
And we intend to get to the root of the problem and look at the culture. But we can't change the culture, we may be able to influence it. But I will ask MP Hussein to come in, and then Senator Hafiz Ali wants to get in as well.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to a statement you had made, CEO, regarding the code of conduct that is distributed throughout the schools for guidelines and for guidance. And coming back to what MP Antoine had indicated, we assume that the children have the same values as the adult. And therefore, we expect that when we send these codes of conduct, that they will adhere to it, which is not going to happen because they're children and they should be treated as such in terms of ensuring, mandating, ensuring, articulating, and putting guidelines in place for them to adhere to the instructions. So I'm asking, if in fact, as MP indicated, if in fact a student is charged with a criminal offense, is a student allowed back into the school, and why is there suspension? Is there something in place where the Education Act doesn't allow expulsions?
Okay, let me start with the last part of your question. The Education Act allows for expulsion of students. The minister has the authority to expel. However, we have not, for the last 10 years, as far as I can remember, we have not expelled students. I think it comes back to the philosophy that we can rehabilitate students. So even if students are suspended or they go on extended suspension, we still try to work within the system to look at trying to rehabilitate those students.
If after 10 years it is not working, I think it's about time we address it in a different manner.
Okay,
But in addition to that, I just wanted to ask
one last question before I go over to Senator Hafiz Ali.
I hear all of the work that is being done, and yes, I applaud both sides, education and particularly community policing. But if after 42 years we are seeing a proliferation of violence, I don't want to assume, so I'm asking a question. Is this normal, or is it as a result of the media, the technology, that it appears to be increased? So I'm asking, is there an increase in violence in school or a decrease? I don't want to assume, so I'm asking.
I would like to respond to that question, if I may.
Sure.
In terms of the data of the police service, we have a consistent decrease in serious crimes, minor crimes, and also minor offenses. That is offenses committed by students in schools. If I may, in the category classified as serious crimes, we would have had 45 such crimes committed in 2015, as against 57 in 2014. The major areas were larceny and sexual offenses. In 2015, there were 19 such sexual offenses committed against children, and a similar figure for larceny involving school children. The previous year stood at 23 and 20 respectively. With respect to minor offenses, which would involve things like indecent assault, malicious wounding, larceny, we would have had for 2015, 51 such offenses. In 2014, there were 69 such offenses. These are minor offenses which involve assault by beating. We would have had 143 in 2015, as against 154 in 2014. Overall, therefore, for 14 and 15, we would have had 280 in 2014.
Thank you very much for those statistics. Very, very interesting statistics. But what I'd like to pose before I come into Senator Ali, do you collect data on a school-by-school basis with respect to reports by students against other students, or actions against them, which, according to the community police, exist on a list that is sent off at the beginning of the school year on unacceptable actions of students?
We would have, through our crime problem analysis unit, we'd be able to pull such data for you if you request such.
I'm simply asking whether you collect it on a school-by-school basis. Do you ask the school on a per-term basis, could you give me all the reports that students have made to their teachers with respect to taxing and bullying? And I think that's the kind of information that I'd like to get to know the true extent of the problem in the schools. But I will thank you for that, the statistics you are giving me, for the official crime statistics that we have. But I really would like it administrative data.
But Chair, if you permit me, I think one of the questions members are also asking is about the overall, whether or not certain programs have an impact in different communities. And we'd also want to share that information with you as well, if we may.
Chair, just to say that we do have the data by school, the Ministry of Education, for suspensions.
Okay, but do you have the data for all the offenses, the reports? Because the way the school is organized, a student has to report to someone. Yeah, a student who has been aggrieved has to report to some authority. That has to be logged somewhere and recorded. Does the principal of the school have the information, just as the superintendent in a police station have a logbook with all the crimes reported in a station? Is the principal mandated to keep a log of these offenses and then submit this log in a timely manner to the Ministry of Education or to the divisional officers or to whom he has to report?
Principals are required to collect, in other words, they provide us with information based on particular categories in which students are suspended. Because So for example, whether it's assault with weapons, bullying, extorting taxes, principals provide us with that information periodically or as requested. So we do have that information, but I want to just add a little bit to the issue of whether there's an increase or decrease. And when we were preparing our response for the commission, we looked at, because the focus was on physical violence, so we pulled out areas such as assault with weapons, assault without weapons, extorting, taxing, in those areas, and we looked over the period 12 to 15, where in 2012, for example, at the secondary level, we had 1,912 cases. In 2013, 1,709, 2014, 1,405, 2015, 1,650. So that in terms of those violent physical confrontation, the pattern more or less, is more or less the same. However, as part of the ministry strategy going forward, when we look at instances of suspensions, we have an increase between 2014 and 2015. But in terms of interpretation of the data, if you weren't aware that the ministry had instituted a policy of zero tolerance on these activities, you would not have realized that the increase may have been in relation to that directive where we take a zero tolerance approach. So that would have contributed. Now that has to be interpreted in the context of the school code of conduct, where there's a variation in the penalties that can be applied from counseling to suspension, or it may go to the police. So schools will determine whether this case warrants counseling or whether the student should be suspended. The zero tolerance would have shifted some of those counseling and parent engagement conferences to suspension, and therefore the interpretation of the data has to be viewed in that context.
Thank you very much. I'd want the Ministry of Education to give some thought to something that I will raise. Before you answer me, I just raise this issue, and then I'll ask Senator Hafiz Ali to pose his question. And the issue I want to raise is this. I am quoting from the Education Act, Chapter 3901 of Trinidad and Tobago, Clause 27, Responsibility of Principals. And it says, subject to this act and the regulations, principals of schools shall be responsible for the day-to-day management of their school, including A, the supervision of the physical safety of pupils. I don't want you to answer my question now, but I want you to give it some thought because I want to come back to it subsequently. How is the Ministry of Education equipping principals of schools to allow them to discharge this function, the supervision of the physical safety of the pupils, as mandated by the Education Act of Trinidad and Tobago? And while you consider that, I would ask Senator Hafiz Ali to pose his question.
This is to the Ministry of Education. How many guidance counselors are there, and if this amount is adequate with the perceived high level of troubled students?
Dr. Bharat Singh, would you respond?
Yes, thank you. In terms of the guidance officers, we currently have allotted 164 positions. We have 151 filled. We have 109 counselors, of which 98 is filled. What we're looking for here is the ideal one-to-one ratio. Currently in the secondary schools, we operate at pretty much a one-to-one for the 125 here in Trinidad. There are two schools that we have an officer sharing responsibility for both schools. In terms of the primary schools, we operate at approximately a 1-to-4 ratio. So in answer to the question, do we need more guidance officers/counselors? Yes. And the reason we would, not only because of what we're seeing right now, But from a best practice perspective, guidance officers, as well as social workers who tend to treat with the more moderate to severe psychosocial issues in the system, so in particular the violence that we're seeing, what we look at and we're trying to move towards is not just the one-to-one ratio in the schools, but the international best practice of ratio as defined by officer to student numbers. So in that regard, what the ideal ratio is approximately 1 to 250. If you have schools that have moderate challenges, we can go up to about 1 to 571 in terms of students. So while initially we are trying and moving towards the 1-to-1 school to officer ratio, ideally we want to move towards the numbers.
And does the teacher absenteeism contribute to this bullying problem that we have in, that the students are left alone? I ask that question because of the school my children go to. So I'll leave it as that and I won't call no names, but in your opinion, does it contribute at all to that?
The Chief Education Officer is going to take the question.
We have a number of teachers who are habitually late or absent in schools. As you're aware, teachers can take up to 14 days occasional and 14 days sick leave. Many of them do. We also have a process which we treat with teachers who are habitually late or who go beyond in terms of the disciplinary process. So the short answer to your question is that there are schools where teacher absenteeism or unpunctuality impacts on this process. It's something that the ministry has already started addressing in terms of first of all, the process of getting teachers to be aware of the consequences, but also the disciplinary process. And we have done training sessions with principals in terms of guiding them. We've had this problem for some time. The problem we had in terms of addressing it is often the disciplinary process that the ministry can take action were not followed, and therefore you move along the process with the evidence, but because it wasn't followed, you end up not having. So we have done some training for principals, we have worked with our supervisors, and that is being addressed. We have a number of teachers who are in fact 100 plus teachers, 100 plus teachers who have taken more than 1,000 minutes late, which the ministry is going to proceed with a Regulation 90. And therefore we are aware that there are schools in which irregularity, unpunctuality are issues, and we are working to deal with it.
A possible solution, and I'm going to raise it to the Ministry of Education for your consideration. And the solution to this is that an absent teacher is going to create the condition for students to behave in deviant actions because there is no supervising authority. Has the ministry given any consideration at all to having a system of substitute teachers available in schools so that on a day in which a teacher is late or a teacher is absent, a substitute teacher from the OJT program, which we have in the country, can simply be asked to leave the staff room and supervise this Form 2 or Form 3 class? In that way, you would have a reserve pool to actually fill in teachers who are chronically late or absent. Any consideration at all to that possibility?
Deputy Permanent Secretary Barrow will respond.
Good morning. We did implement the re-implement, because it was implemented before, the substitute teacher in secondary and we expanded it now to primary schools in this November of 2014. So we expanded the program so that it's available online for anybody to register to be a substitute teacher. It's fully automated, so you don't have to, there's not a lot of paperwork involved, so it reduces the amount of time that it would take to put everything in place. So basically, principals can access the system on a short notice, and get access to substitute teachers. The issue that we do have, though, is that we don't have enough persons registered on the system. So we have been trying to encourage more persons to register so that they can be a substitute teacher in the system.
Thank you very much. So that once the program gets going, I'm coming back to you, Senator Hafiz, but once the system gets going, could we say that maybe by 2017, unsupervised classes will be a thing of the past in Trinidad and Tobago?
I don't know if it will be a thing of the past, but I do think that the situation would have been improved. We have had some good results with the system so far, and I just wanted to also add that since 2014, we have been focusing on teacher punctuality and irregularity, and that is why, too, we have been able to work a little bit closer with the Service Commissions Department with regards to actually implementing the same Regulation 90 against persons.
Let's look at January 2017 as a target date then. It should not be too difficult to implement this program.
This is just a statement I want to make. I'm aware that you all use the OJTs to supervise, if you want to call it, the classes when there isn't any teachers. And I will assume as well that the OJT doesn't have the qualification as a qualified teacher. My problem is that the OJT sometimes becomes the teacher for 2 academic years. That's my problem. And the students eventually suffers.
Thank you, Chair. Just have a couple questions.
The ministry's policy is that OJTs are not used to supervise classes. So if it is happening, then it is something that we need to look at. The OJTs that we have sent, for example, in primary or secondary schools have specific functions. At the secondary schools, they assist, for example, the tech work teachers, or they assist the librarians. So there are specific functions where they don't take the lead, but they work alongside. And I'm not saying that it is not happening, but it's against the ministry policy to use OJTs in that way.
Well, when I have meted my constituents, I get dozens and dozens and dozens of reports about OJT teaching the classes. That is a fact, and it had to be dealt with now.
To our attention, and we'll address it.
Okay, one follow-up question to that before I go to MP Hussain, and that is, do you have a pool of qualified but unplaced teachers in the teaching service of Trinidad and Tobago?
We have an order of merit list with the Service Commissions Department for teachers who are awaiting placement based on vacancies.
Okay, and can this pool be used in collaboration with the Teaching Service Department to draw upon to assist schools which may be having a problem with absenteeism while they are awaiting their placement?
All the teachers, all the persons on the order of merit list were invited to register as the substitute teachers, and some of them did. So we do use them to that extent, but with regards to absenteeism, we won't be able to replace persons unless they're on a leave of absence like that.
Well, and may I recommend to the administrator send out a notice again to these teachers that they should re-register once again. Maybe they may have missed the first online notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, but I just want to ask a follow-up to Senator Ali, to Ms. Bharat Singh, regarding guidance officers. In addition to guidance officers, do you have psychologists in the various schools?
We do have a small cadre of psychologists, MP. They are assigned at a district level, again, to treat with the more severe cases. We've also been leveraging their expertise to conduct psychoeducational assessments. And again, it's a small cadre, approximately 6.
Thank you. To the Ministry of Education, is there a difference in the systems used to monitor discipline in government schools as opposed to denominational schools? That's the first question.
the disciplinary process, well, first of all, let me say that the purview of discipline lies with the Teaching Service Commission, but the disciplinary process is the same for all schools. So that if an infraction is committed by a teacher, the process is identical to both government and government-assisted schools.
Okay, and that's pertaining to teachers, no students.
The code of conduct applies system-wide, and therefore the guidelines provided are the same.
I understand that. Okay, Chair.
No. You can continue one more, but I do want to bring in other members at this time who may want to speak, including the chair, of course.
Thank you, Chair. Do you have, I understand through your document that you had sent that there's a disparity in terms of the information that you get from the schools other than government, maybe because of the fact that they don't want to highlight that there are issues in their schools and so forth. So how do you plan to address that disparity? And how do you deal with students who have been diagnosed with special needs or disorders in terms of behavioral problems and attitudinal problems, which could contribute to violence in school?
Okay, I will answer the first part and I'll pass the second part to Dr. Bharat Singh. And I think you're speaking specifically to the reporting of incidents that may take place. The Ministry of Education, one of the things within the last year and a half or 2 years we've identified really speaks to the issue of leadership and governance at the level of the school and the supervision of that. So we have in fact been working with the Division of School Supervision in terms of monitoring and ensuring that to some extent not to some extent, but there's compliance in terms of the requirements and matters that should be reported. There's a requirement for every single incident that takes place in a school to be reported by the principal. So ensuring compliance. In fact, every incident that takes place in a school, there's a requirement for immediate reporting, so that we are working along with school supervision and principals in all schools, denominational and government schools, to ensure that the guidelines and the procedures are followed. I'll let Dr. Bharat Singh answer the other part in terms of special needs students.
Bharat Singh?
Great, sorry. So quickly, so we do have a special education unit in the Ministry of Education. Once the child is flagged, whether it comes from the teacher or the principal, the special education unit, specifically the teacher, would go down into the school. It might be something that would be mild, that we can deal with relatively quickly in a meeting with a teacher and a brief screening. We would be able to determine whether or not the child has met its milestone or not, provide teachers with alternative strategies of intervention, and we can do it at that level. The other level would mean intervening on a more deep level, if you will, for psych ed assessments or other types of assessments to determine what exactly might be the challenges of this child, and then institute an IEP and move forward like that.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Mr. Stewart?
My first question, to the Ministry of Education. What role does the guidance officer and the social worker as two separate entities play within the school system?
Dr. Bharat Singh, please.
Sure. The guidance officers, they're responsible for academic counseling, for career pathing, and for treating with personal social type issues. Examples would be self-esteem, anger management, these types of issues, personal identity. They operate in terms of what we call a universal approach. They generally do a lot of classroom size interventions. Doesn't mean that they don't deal with individuals at times, and they're heavily preventative. The social workers Again, we don't have them one-to-one, but they deal with more moderate to severe psychosocial issues. Their mandate is to treat not just with the child in the school, but to go out into the homes and into the communities. So in terms of that area.
Okay. Is that follow-up? Okay, a follow-up from Senator Stewart.
I know you mentioned earlier, I think you said there are a number of psychologists attached to these schools. At what time is there a referral done to the psychologist, or a psychologist is asked to come into the school to conduct an assessment on a particular student?
At this time, we don't actually, just sort of clarify, we don't have psychologists in the schools. As I mentioned, they operate at a district level. Okay. And how that is done is when the cases come up at a district level, they come to a multidisciplinary team. That would mean the leadership of the district, which consists of guidance, the senior guidance officers, social workers, and special ed. The case would then be determined at that point which would be a best fit. And in this instance, it might be referred to the psychologist, who would then begin to address the situation. Thank
you. The concept of boot camps have been around quite a while now, not so much in Trinidad, but in the United States of America. I don't have any data or any statistics on its effectiveness, but as the Ministry of Education and or the police service thinking about the use of boot camps to deal with repeat offenders or members of gangs. Or as we are seeing, I think I heard the Minister of National Security mention it recently. But the fact that the two young men from Trinity East and I believe another school who were killed recently appear to be members of gangs. And my question is the Ministry of Education and or the police service considering the use of boot camps to deal with repeat offenders or members of gangs, identified members of gangs?
Yes. Both from the Ministry of Education and the Community Policing Department.
Can respond for the ministry. What I can tell you is that it's not one of the measures that we have considered at the level of the ministry, and I'm going to say as yet, I don't know what would have come up from the consultations that we've had, and therefore it may be one of the suggestions coming forward, but we have not at this point in time considered that as one of the options.
From the Community Policing Department, and we are talking now about the chronic offender. I mean the really bad student, not the one who can be rehabilitated, the one who is committing major crime. Do you think that the initiative suggested by Major General Antoine is something that will assist the community policing in separating some of these chronic repeat offenders from those whom you can assist in rehabilitating?
Mr. Chair, we have not discussed the issue of boot camp at this point.
Very well. I would want to raise then for consideration both by the Ministry of Education and the Community Policing Department the initiatives which existed half a century ago in many of the high schools in Trinidad and Tobago, in which discipline was not such a big problem, was always there. We did have a national cadet force. We did have a girl guides unit. We had, I understand, the St. John's ambulance having a presence in many of the schools, teaching people discipline and caring for others. Do you think that we need to give a serious consideration once again to reintroducing some of these disciplinary measures which will instill the correct values in the young people at a particular early age? And that will maybe help in dealing with these chronic offenders.
Chair.
Both from the community policing, well, because we are coming back more to the community policing as we close. Yeah.
We have done more than consider, Chair. In fact, what we have done, and we've recognized the importance of involvement in students in extracurricular activities in relation to all dimensions of school and schooling and the overall development. So we have actually asked schools to facilitate at least every student being involved in one extracurricular activity. And in fact, our interaction with the cadet force And some of these other organizations have started. In fact, next month, I think there are over 10 schools where we're supposed to commission. So these things are more than a consideration for us, but it's actually part of our strategy going forward.
We'll ask Senator Stewart to come in at this point.
To the Ministry of Education, when it comes to violence among students, often or sometimes the perpetrators themselves are victims of a larger social problem, maybe stemming from home, the community. Some may even have a mental or psychological problem. How does the Ministry of Education collaborate, let's say, with the parents or the identified doctor or physician in treating with these students?
The approach utilized by the Guidance, the Student Support Services Division, takes both the offenders and the victims into consideration. So it's both ways. Dr. Bharat Singh mentioned a process where things can be dealt with persons who are connected to the school, can be escalated to a district team or to the psychologist. I know there's also the opportunity, for example, for assessments to be done based on recommendations from the school or the officers attached to the school. I could probably ask Dr. Bharat Singh to expand on that.
Before Dr. Bharat Singh comes in, I have a follow-up to the question posed by Senator Stewart, a slightly different angle, and that is in relation to the school curriculum itself. If the socialization in the community and the home seems to be lacking with respect to proper civil behavior, it seems to be that the school has a responsibility to contribute to the resocializing of the individual, to follow authority and to follow certain structures of civil society. I'd like to know if the Ministry of Education has, at this stage, considered looking at the curriculum of schools and teaching students from age 5 when they enter the primary school system the types of behavior that they should and should not engage in as part of the curriculum, what they should and should not do in relation to teachers, parents, and other students. Do you think it is worthwhile to start teaching students on what correct behavior and protocol and manners would be at an age 5 level?
At the primary school level, we do have, as part of the curriculum currently, some of those very skills that you're talking about incorporated in different elements. The primary school curriculum utilizes an integrated approach so that it's not a subject-centered as you go higher up the primary school or at secondary school. And a lot of what you're speaking to is in fact part of that process. In addition to that, we have what we call health and family life at the primary school, which is a skill-based approach which is integrated across and treats with the issue of values, the self, relationships. So it is in there. I don't know if you were looking at pulling it out and making it much more visible.
Could I stop you? What I'm talking about is that these programs no doubt exist, but we have a problem nonetheless. How effective have the programs been, and have you re-evaluated what you have been doing both at the primary and at the secondary schools with respect to inculcating into students social skills which are acceptable to the wider society?
Sure. What I can tell you, and what you're probably are not aware of, is that the curriculum in the primary school has been revised. We are still looking at it again as part of our review process. It has been revised, and what has been implemented, I think it's in 2013, is now in the process of being rolled out. So that it is pretty early to see, or to give a true assessment of the implementation and the rollout. In that review process, we would have considered some of these concerns you've raised, and we actually put it in. So it's now being rolled out, and therefore, I guess, subject to the review that we are doing right now, we'll be able to make a determination.
Could I also add that the Prime Minister just about 3 weeks ago appointed a task force to review both the primary school and the ECCE curriculum. In addition to the national consultation, it was again one of the matters discussed, and it was part of the survey that was administered prior to the consultation.
I go on. Thank you very much, Permanent Secretary. To members of the committee, a question now to the Community Policing Department. Is the Community Policing Department considering being involved in the school curriculum in terms of dealing with the youngsters age 5, secondary school students entering Form 1, age 11, as the police force before a community police unit existed? The police officers in a district visited schools to actually interact with students. That was 30, 40 years ago. Are you considering that kind of intervention as well, a once-a-week visit to a school simply to interact with students on behavior, not necessarily within a school, but as they leave school to get their transport, as they are in school uniform, how they conduct themselves, the types of activities that are acceptable, that are unacceptable, the types which are of a criminal nature, and you begin to socialize at an early age, and you continue the socialization and teaching process in Form 1 in the high school system. Are you considering such a program from your department?
Yes, sir. We have already considered that, and we have implemented that in that from a community policing perspective. This system has already been implemented throughout the schools in Trinidad and Tobago.
Is it that you have a structured program where the community police department in a particular district has a schedule that today we are going to visit the school? So every week the school sees your presence, or is it not so structured yet?
It is so structured, sir. And it is a tremendous success as we speak. It's an ongoing process, and it's part of our proactive initiative of fighting crime or solving the challenges as it pertains to the school children, Children Nation School.
Stuart?
Chairman, can I contribute to what my colleague would have said?
Yes, sure.
In addition to what Superintendent Paul would have said, one of the things that we are seeking to advance at this inquiry is having our police youth clubs more properly settled in secondary and primary school, more particular secondary school. The target market for the PYCs, as you know, is children from 5 to 25 years old. What we have recognized in all the districts where we have PYCs established, we have seen a reduction in serious crimes as well as minor offenses. We feel that if the ministry embraces this, we're looking towards boot camps, which is an American approach to dealing with their challenges. We have some homegrown solutions which have worked for over the years. All these programs have worked. The data tells us the programs have worked. We can look towards our PYCs or city program to find solutions in schools. We don't have to look anywhere else. And the data supports our position that these programs are in fact effective. And we want to have the police youth clubs embraced by the ministry and together with them to advance these initiatives in schools.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are you then recommending that for the known troublemakers in school, and they do exist, that it is mandatory that these deviants in the school system be required to participate in the youth club mechanism so that they can be re-socialized by what you teach them at the youth club?
We recommend the program not just for students who are facing challenges, but also those who are well socialized, because the interface between those who have challenges and those who do not will benefit those who perhaps are facing challenges.
Thank you very much. You see, the reason I raise it is this. My concern with the youth club is it that you are attracting the students who are already well behaved, and that the students who are badly behaved somehow are escaping the net of the discipline that the police youth club is offering?
Our records reflect that we are attracting all students, which is why we firmly believe if we were to enter schools at the primary and secondary level, we'll have a much greater impact with our nation's school children. If we have this program in schools over a 5 and 10 year period, the impact it will have on our children 10 years will be amazing. The data tells us the programs do in fact work. Let us give it some proper consideration.
And that the participation in the program then would have to be recorded as in fact you have to register in school and fill in a register so that you will keep a track of those who have participated, those who are absent, those who are delinquent, and you will be able to know who are the ones who are taking in the program seriously and those who are not.
What we see for PYC, in the same way how our forage clubs operate and our pathfinders operate within your normal school hours and after school, and then it's difficult to get kids to come or to stay back after school. What we see for the PYC is during normal school hours that the police clubs are allowed to operate, whether it's once a month, but it must come with the police, of course, backing these programs, and the ministry, but it must come during school hours, not after. And we are saying that all the challenges we're seeing now, manifesting themselves now in schools, we are saying over time you will see a change among these students, the good students and the ones who are facing challenges.
May I ask finally whether you have submitted a proposal to the Ministry of Education with respect to integrating the police youth clubs into the normal school curriculum process?
We are using this inquiry to do so.
Very well.
I think, Mr. Chairman, you may have just asked that question, but further to that, one of the recommendations that you made was greater collaboration among government agencies and also the implementation of the city program. So the question is, if these recommendations were forwarded to the ministries, relevant ministries, education, national security, and any relevant authority, and when can we expect these recommendations to be implemented?
We have not forwarded those to the ministry. We are using this forum to advance those positions. What we can do subsequent to this session, we can do that.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my question, just a follow-up to Senator Stewart, to the Ministry of Education. I am aware that at one time the juvenile, social workers of the juvenile court would have gone into schools, particularly the schools that had problems with difficult students, and for some reason it had stopped, and maybe it's a recommendation that you could probably reactivate that program. Just to let you know that we received from the Anti-Bullying Association of Trinidad and Tobago some causes of what might be causing bullying, cyberbullying, all which may include acts of physical aggression. And there were four causes that were at the top of the list. And that is parental neglect and rejection, destructive criticism, breakdown in family structure, parental death or sibling death, which is a high risk, and 4, chaos and conflict within the homes among parents. So that's just 4 of a number of causes. And yet I feel that there is not enough intervention where parents are concerned. And I know that Chief Education Officer had indicated that parents are concerned about getting the time off from work because they will lose income. And just a recommendation, if you could probably, in light of the fact that you want to work with ministries, I mean, it's important for interministerial committees to be set up, that you could look at parents actually accessing NIS in collaboration with, of course, their employers to be paid where they would be normally not receive remuneration for absenteeism. Because it is so important for parents and for family members to be involved with the children who are being difficult. Because they're not only difficult in school, you know, they're probably difficult at home as well. And therefore, it is important for the parents, for the family to receive counseling. And it's so important that you can probably look at the Ministry of Finance proposing a program where they can be paid while they are attending these sessions. So that's a proposal I would like to make. And to the community policing, you have indicated in your submission to us that you have in a part of your program some sort of spiritual guidance. Who provides the spiritual guidance? Thank you, Chair.
Religious leaders, various religious leaders.
Okay, and a follow-up on that before I move on to other substantive issues. I was told we can stretch the time a little bit longer than 12 o'clock because the number of issues we have are still unresolved. There are a number unresolved. But with respect to spiritual guidance, does the Ministry of Education have as part of its curriculum ethical training that may be not related to any special religion, but with respect to the correct behavior, proper behavior, right and wrong, moral and immoral, just and unjust? Do you have that type of subject in your curriculum?
Well, there are two pieces to that equation. Let me deal, because we have a system which operates denominational government. Within denominational schools, generally the perspective of that particular faith is done. Yeah. But there are opportunities within there for students of other religions to participate in their own. And many schools do in fact have opportunities for that kind of interaction. In government schools, all religions are facilitated so that and one of the things that we've been looking at is the issue of teaching about religion as opposed to teaching the specific tenets of us and the issue of indoctrination. The values part of what you mentioned is in fact built in. For example, at the primary schools, we have a character citizenship area which is built into that. So it is not directly tied into any religious perspective, but what are those values that we want all our children to, so there is that element.
Very well, thank you. Before I ask the panel for another round of questions, I want to return to the question I raised when I quoted from the Education Act, which furnishes to the principal the responsibility for the supervision of the physical safety of pupils. It is known that the principal of a school is in charge of the administration of that school. Regardless of the position I currently hold, I cannot visit a school without the knowledge of that principal. That principal is entirely in control of the school. We did get a submission from the Naparima Girls High School, which indicated, and we suspect that that's one of the schools where school violence may have been minimized. You can't eliminate it, it may have been minimized. They indicated that in their school there are things such as safe school ambassadors, peer helpers, no bullying zones, etc., that the school itself has organized so that at all stages of the school system, the school population is quite aware of what are the do's and don'ts with respect to behavior. And I want to relate that to the question I posed earlier. We are giving principals of schools, according to the law, the responsibility for the supervision of the physical safety of the pupils. What is the Ministry of Education doing to ensure that principals can discharge these functions with the correct training, with the correct resources, the correct interventions? Do you, for example, have a day where principals from all schools can interact with each other so that they can learn from each other some of the techniques they have used in their schools which can be transplanted? Are principals given the adequate amount of resources? What is the relationship between the principals of the school and the community police department? The relationship between the principals of the schools and the social intervention workers? Given that principals have such a huge responsibility, I'd really like to know how have the ministry prepared principals to handle the current environment of escalating school violence?
Sure, you went across a number of areas and dimensions. I mentioned earlier the issue of leadership and governance in schools, and it's an area where we do have challenges. However, we have and while the principal is the person in charge and has the responsibility, all schools have been asked to set up a school-based management team, or what we previously called middle management, so that part of the process in terms of how schools are led and managed involves some delegation and decision-making at another level. And that cuts across a number of dimensions. In fact, we have started rolling out a school-based management model which we developed in-house through the Division of School Supervision involving parents, and we are in the process of finalizing the way forward with tutor because we need to get their involvement. And it looks at how, looking at schools in multiple dimensions, not just the issue of safety of schools, because what has been happening in our system, and in particular schools where there is a high incidence of indiscipline, all the energies of the school tend to focus on one dimension and we lose our core function. So we've developed a school-based management model which puts the student at the center, but target those areas which those schools, high-performing schools, follow. So for example, teaching and learning, parental engagement, leadership and governance. That model builds it out to allow the principals of schools to more effectively manage. It's a process that we have started with principals, and therefore it's really delegated management where everybody. There's one issue I want to raise, and is an area that we've had some discussion on in terms of the roles of teachers, in terms of also looking at supervision and safety and security to the student. And I know legally there is an area which, if you are a teacher or an adult and you have students in your presence, then there's also a responsibility or delegated responsibility, duty of care, for you also to be part of the process. So while at the school level, the principal has the overall authority, the model that we are using really delegates some of that across. We have, in fact, been looking at training. You asked about principals meeting. We have fraternities. Schools, both at the primary and the secondary level, are organizing fraternities where clusters of schools, principals meet with supervisors periodically once a month, and where some of these, in fact, I have actually mandated my school supervisors to look at best practice, and we've started the process of identifying some of those best practices, and therefore you have principals from one fraternity who may be attending meeting at another fraternity's share of that. So there are a number of things that are actually taking place, because the issue of violence and indiscipline is not limited to any particular issue. It's really an overall approach we're trying to do, and within that framework, we will manage leadership in discipline in the schools, but also look at what our main purpose and objective is.
Just a follow-up, do you have a structured program where principals will meet, say, once every term to share notes with each other and to actually create action plans on how they will deal with some of the challenges that they face?
One of the requirements for all school is to have what we call a school improvement plan or school development plan. Again, when we were looking at issues at this school, we recognized that there were gaps in that planning process, and therefore we have been working with principals in terms of helping them to develop that plan, identifying core areas. In fact, one of the gaps that we noticed was that in developing the plan, principals didn't often use the data that was available to inform the plan, and that's one of the areas we are focusing, not only in terms of treating violence and indiscipline, but also with the school development plan.
Thank you very much. And a final follow-up now to the Community Policing Department, and that is the Community Police Department developing a very close working relationship with the principals and teachers of all schools within their jurisdiction, so that the moment a principal or a teacher calls the community police, cell phone or email, that we have a potential problem brewing, you are able to respond to their concerns in a timely fashion?
Yes, sir. Exactly that is the status with the community policing and schools, supervisors, principals, as the case may be. But Mr. Chair, if you could just allow me to add further, I want to suggest on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that our two intervention, city, which is caring intervention for troubled youths, and our police youth clubs, a tremendous success. And I will say with the police youth clubs, I just want to elaborate. We have some success stories. Some of our success stories are Ms. Ayana Roy Webster, MP for Tobago East, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister.
So Roy is a success story.
Right. Also, we have Ms. Nadine Stewart. I think she's somewhere here today, a former youth club member. Presently, you are Mom House. Right? Thank you very much. We have several doctors, attorneys, engineers, police officers, business personnel emanate from the police.
And we would want them to continue, and we would want all the deviants out there to know that the community police service is looking at them, and we want all the law-abiding students to know that they can call the community police when they see a gang fight going on, and there will be a rapid response. Can I get that assurance?
Of course, sir.
Very
Especially
well.
earlier when we were looking for role models, we have the ideal role models right here, sir.
Very well. Thank you. MP Nawal Hussein wishes to make an intervention at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the school-based management, is the school-based management model that you have here in Trinidad designed after any model practice outside of Trinidad and Tobago?
We would have been looking at models around the world, and what we have done is taken from the best, but actually customize it to our, well, not even hybrid, it's homegrown because it was developed, we looked, in terms of developing the model, we actually started where we identified there was a problem in our system. And therefore we started searching for appropriate mechanism to deal with that. In doing so, we looked at the effective school research and looked at what effective schools were doing across the world. And even there are schools here in Trinidad who have some of those embedded in it. So that the model we have is not replicated anywhere else, but in fact takes elements, you will find common elements. So it's really homegrown, as I said. It took us about 1.5 years, almost 2 years to develop. And we are still in the process as we go forward refining.
Thank you very much, CEO. I thought we could have gone a little bit further, but there is a sitting of the House this afternoon, and we do need to allow the members of the House of Representatives to prepare themselves for that sitting. So in the 4 minutes or so we have left, I will ask members of the committee to raise their final questions before we close. Yeah, Senator Hafiz Ali.
Well, I'll ask a selfish question first. Where in Barataria is the youth club? Because I see it have Barataria as one of the clubs just now. The high level of incidents in the minor, the assault by beating. Ms. Lewis said I would have a decrease in minor, but I watching from 20, it moves to 154, then in 2015 to 143. And if it is, this is for both sides now, if it is that the success stories that the Police Youth Club is talking about, wouldn't it be prudent to ask the Ministry of Education for it to be mandatory for those deviant students to be admitted into the Police Youth Clubs?
So, with reference to the address of the club, in that area we have the El Chico Arangues Police Youth Club. They are based at the Sama Police Station. And in the case of the El Chico Police Youth Club, they are based at the Barataria El Chico Police Station. So it's 2 clubs here.
If I may also add as well, Chair, with respect to the statement of the member, the figures that we would have submitted indicate that for minor crime, the total for 2015 were 51, and for 2014 was 69. For minor offenses, the total we have would be 143 for 2015 and 154 for 2014.
We can send those in writing, and we will evaluate them. In the interest of time, Senator Stewart, your last question.
Final question to the Ministry of Education. The school environment can influence the likelihood of violence. What steps are being taken to improve school connectedness and the overall school environment?
DPS McKellar, could you answer?
Good afternoon to the Chair and the member who posed the question, Senator. The Ministry has always been and remains committed to providing a safe and secure environment for teachers and students and all other persons ancillary who occupy the school plant. Of course, there are a number of strategies and mechanisms that the Ministry has used and continues to use to create this safe and secure environment, because it's at the heart, the bedrock of facilitating the delivery of the curriculum. We have been using levels of connectivity in that schools are connected, networked with each other with the Ministry of Education head office via internet, email. So we do have that mechanism in place whereby if there are incidents that take place within the school, they can report same via email to the Ministry and other relevant agencies. Of course, telephone, fax, and other electronic media are available.
Very much. We will take it up further. Retired General MP Ansel Antoine, last question.
Given the recent suspension of classes in one of our secondary schools, have gangs been identified operating in our schools? And if so, are these gangs affiliated to gangs in the community? And I want to piggyback on the questions from the Naparima Girls High School in their submission. What measures been taken both by the Ministry of Education and the police service to treat with gangs in the schools if they exist?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Chair, the issue of gangs in school is one that presents some challenge to us. So while we in the school personnel may identify groups of students, it's difficult for us within the school environment to connect with particular gangs. And therefore, in terms of making that concrete linkage, we would need support from, I guess, the police service. In terms of treatment of students who may be members of gangs, and this is one of the things we've been talking about, we have our standard approach to treating with instances of deviance in the schools, which we will deal with, including persons who have been suspected of gang activity. However, in terms of, and one of the strategies we have been using, we have been working with other agencies, and particularly with the TTPS, so that, for example, the school that you referred to, we have strategies that we have worked which will be done within our personnel at the school, but we are also working with the TTPS in terms of having patrols and also some initiatives that they have outlined in terms of dealing with students, both within the school in terms of some of the programs they're running, but also with students when they are out of school. What, for example, you may not know is in the very said school that we had that incident, there were patrols where at the beginning of school, at the end of school, during lunchtime, where students who congregate at particular locations were encouraged to go home. So that we are actually looking at strengthening our interagency collaboration, interministerial collaboration as part of our strategy. But in terms of the identification and getting concrete evidence with respect to gangs, we are challenging the ministry. While we may recognize that there are groups of students with opposing sides, it's difficult for us outside of treating with the specific acts or incidents that take place.
Thank you very much. We are way past our 12:15 cutoff time, but I would like, as we close, to ask the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Education and the Assistant Commissioner of Police Community Relations, Ms. Inez Joseph, to make some brief closing remarks before I wrap up today's proceedings.
I just would like to say that I think it was clear that from today's proceedings that it is definitely a complex issue. And to add to that, that I do believe that cultural change can happen, albeit at a slower rate to social change. It does, however, require the recognition and acceptance of the issue, and both an integrated and in-depth approach, which begins with each one of us.
Commissioner of Police.
Ms. Lewis will give our closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Chair. Like the PS at the Ministry of Education, we are very pleased to have been invited to be here today. We are well aware of the problem to which we face in our nation's schools. And so therefore, as a police service, we are more than willing to collaborate with the ministry and other stakeholders to end violence in schools. We believe, from a policing perspective, we do have a solution. And we would hope after today that those solutions are given due consideration and we're able to advance forward. We thank you for having us here.
And I wish to thank members of the committee for participating, this Joint Select Committee for participating in this very critical proceedings. This is the first public hearing, as I said before, of the Joint Select Committee on Public Administration and Social Services. And this, of course, is the first topic that we have chosen to investigate. I'd like to thank members of the committee for their active participation. I want to thank all those who submitted, made submissions to us. I want to thank you, members of the police service, and the members of the Ministry of Education for being here to edify us and the general population on the various issues involved. To members of the public gallery, the media, and to our listening audience, I also wish to thank them for their interest in this particular subject. This is not the last word. This is only the beginning of our investigation into this problem. It is hoped that we shall invite you again after we have had the views of other stakeholders in this matter, in particular parents and psychologists, etc., Anti-Bullying Association, maybe even some students who have been bullies and are being bullied. We want to get to the root of this problem so that we can generate solutions. It is our hope that we will be able to minimize this unacceptable level of behavior that we are witnessing so that students can focus their attention on quadratic equations and balancing complex chemical formulae. So that I want to thank you all for being here and to indicate that most likely you will be invited. We appreciate your presence and your input, and the conversation has started. Thank you all, and therefore at 12:21 I'd like to bring this meeting, first meeting of our JSC, to a close. Thank you.